are these people?
And I think that this is a problem amongst Assange supporters often, and don't come for me. I'm not like criticizing or anything like that, but I think that so often people see Julian Assange as superhuman, and you know, he can handle that, and he's so brave, he's so strong. And yes, those things are true. He is very brave, he is very strong, but he is just a dude, and he has been a victim of psychological torture for over a decade. And anybody who is subjected to that is going to have a very difficult time. So we need to remember that he is still just flesh and blood. He's not superhuman. He's not, immortal. He's a dude. He's a father. He's a brother. He's a husband. He's a son. He's a friend. He's just a dude. So, and you know, he's not just a symbol. I think that that's, you know, part of it. Obviously, he is being used as kind of the figurehead of the fight against, press freedom. But he is a human being, and his life is valuable and worth fighting for. And also, the UC Global stuff is, I mean, it sounds like a bad spy movie, right? Right. The UC Global is a Spanish security firm that was originally hired by the Ecuadorian embassy to provide security for the embassy and the president's family, in particular his children. And then after there's a regime change or an election in Ecuador, and there's a new administration that takes office, UC Global is very quickly co-opted by the CIA, funded by Sheldon Adelson, and turned into a spying operation against Julian Assange. And that includes conversations with his legal team. So he cannot get a fair trial in the United States. That's just not a thing that can happen.
Well, and he's not a citizen of the United States. He's Australian. No. I still come back to the original point, regardless of whatever happened. He's not a U.S. citizen, nor, and we have no jurisdiction over.
But we do. The United States can do whatever we want, whenever we want. We are above the law. We are the law. At least that's the way that we see it. So it's
American exceptionalism. There you have it. Right?
Yes. And he's not an American citizen. WikiLeaks is not an American publication. They've never been in the United States. So it is the United States seeking global jurisdiction over information and journalism. And then I guess to answer your question about how I came to Assange, I mean, I'd always been a supporter. I had always read the leaks and bought merch and donated and all of that stuff, and followed very closely what they were up to. But I was really pushed into hyperdrive once he was yanked out of the Ecuadorian embassy. Right. I thought, before then I was like, come on, they're not going to arrest a journalist for doing journalism. Like, they're going to make him stay in the Ecuadorian embassy. They're going to, screw around with him a little bit, but they're not going to arrest. They arrested a journalist for doing journalism.
It's on your Substack about how they laid the foundation for the Ukrainian war, how that happened. So some of the reporting that you did kind of leads into this particular piece. So if you could kind of go over that and explain the correlation between the reporting that you just did on intelligence community and then how they laid the foundation for this proxy war against Russia.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that I wrote that article on meddling in Western meddling in Ukraine because I was so beyond sick of the mainstream media and indeed people who absorb the mainstream media, like parroting the line that this war is completely unprovoked, and then acting as if Ukraine is this blemishless victim of this upholder of liberal liberal values and European civilization against this crusading orc-like barbarian at the gate. I mean, it was actually at the time. It was the fact that the coup, which that's what it was in Ukraine in 2014. 2014 was it wasn't a secret particularly. I mean, it was kind of acknowledged. And there was this. I mean, so essentially the National Endowment for Democracy, which is avowedly, its chiefs have openly said on numerous occasions that it serves to do openly what the CIA used to do covertly. It was created by CIA officials in the 80s, and it funds opposition media, opposition parties, opposition NGOs and campaign groups, and they are only active in countries where the US wants to change the government. There's no NED operations in Saudi Arabia, for instance, and so they in the year leading up to the Maidan coup, NED was funding to the tune of I think it was in excess of 20 million, which is a lot of money there.
20 million was a lot then.
Yeah, well, I mean, in Ukraine as well, it's an enormous amount of money, and so essentially, it created a shadow political structure of opposition media, activists, etc., that could be activated, as it were, to stir up unrest if the government didn't do what Washington wanted it to do. So in December 2013, I believe, that the Ukraine was on the verge of signing a deal. It was a European Association Agreement deal with the EU, which was, the terms were pretty bad. It would have led to mass privatization. And it would have, amongst other kind of horrors, and it would have shifted Ukraine economically and politically from Russia's orbit. Now, Russia offered a far better trade deal and economic and political agreement, which the government accepted. And it's worth noting that the President Yankovic, he was not a kind of Putin puppet. He and Putin were not, on particularly close terms. Right. And so after in the wake of this, an enormous number of individuals and groups that were, receiving NED funding, started whipping up trouble. The protests quickly became extremely violent. Where they were getting the weapons from, remains a mystery to this day. There were several massacres of protesters that seemed to have been carried out as false flags by opposition elements in order to, stoke violent revolution, which is what came to pass. The police evacuated Kiev because it was so dangerous, and they were being killed in numbers. In the wake of the coup, there were two, the Luhansk and Donetsk. There were these two quote unquote breakaway regions. There was this is an area which comprises up to half of Ukraine's population. People who for centuries have seen themselves as Russian, or speak Russian as a first language, or indeed only language, and have a kind of familial, economic, cultural ties to Russia just over the border. And so the Ukrainian government began cracking down on them brutally, and in effect, the waging of war, which led to the deaths of thousands of people, many of them innocent civilians and children. And none of for all of the talk about Russia's propaganda prowess, none of this was leaked out into the mainstream media in the West at all. We got this completely bogus and one-sided narrative that this was a Russian war of aggression and Russia invaded Ukraine. That never happened. There was a limited number of usually freelancers and soldiers of fortune, or people who did so out of some sense of patriotism. That was the war that was going on.
Well, I wanted the audience, thank you everyone for tuning in. And we have another special guest that we're having join us, an investigative journalist who has been with me before, who he's an American journalist, but he's independent and last time he was in Spain. And then he was in the Donbass region for a day, and he will talk about his experiences of what just happened. So please, everybody, let's welcome Wyatt Reade. Hello, Wyatt.
Hey, Tara. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. I know both you and Vanessa are so busy. So I appreciate both your time to kind of educate the Western audience, because I'd been saying to Vanessa earlier in the show, we are so limited in what we're seeing now, especially with RTs being censored. And in Europe, you can't see the articles at all, but in the US, it's very difficult. And we're just now getting pounded with one narrative. So you had something extraordinary happen to you, and I am so glad you are safe. And I'm going to get emotional because I was so worried about you. But Wyatt, could you describe to me what happened to our audience? And I'm glad you're safe, and I'm not going to cry. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and that's very, very sweet of you to say. And honestly, I want to preface this by saying what I experienced was just a very, very minor taste of what the people that I have been talking to and interacting with every day have been experiencing for 8 years. But on Saturday night, I arrived here in Donetsk and was here at the Donbass Palace Hotel for less than an hour and was met with an artillery strike directly on our position. The windows of this hotel were shattered. Once again, a artillery strike, I believe a 155 millimeter strike from the Kiev regime forces hit just across the way. And I will actually take the viewers to go have a chance to see exactly the after effects of this attack by the Kiev regime. We have a strike here. You can see the after effects. This window has been shattered. The glass has been taken out. This was the most minor effect of this strike that took place just 30 meters over in this direction. I was outside when it happened. I watched this artillery strike hit our hotel. I was about 100 meters away, so I watched in front of my eyes a massive ball of flames and smoke rose up at least 3 stories high directly in front of me. I was, as I said, about 100 meters away. I was blown away. I was petrified. I was terrified. It was like nothing I've seen or felt in my life. I crouched down in the corner and had shattered glass from the buildings around me that was blown out by the pressure of the attack, rained down all around me. I immediately posted the video. I started recording about 5 seconds after this blast took place, 5 to 10 seconds after it took place. I captured my reaction to this. I captured the smoke and the car alarms going off and the natural consequences of an artillery strike on a civilian area, which is, of course, for the people that have been living here, then that's nothing new. This is what they've been enduring for 8 years. But to me, it was very new. It was an extremely new experience, horrific, breathtaking, something that I really don't wish upon anyone. But this is, again, what has been happening here for 8 years in a civilian area to a hotel that is known to host journalists. This is the 3rd time in 2 months that this same block has been struck by the Kiev regime. It's a clear attempt to intimidate journalists, to stop people from coming here. And while I don't want to necessarily say that this was an attack on me personally, I do find it bizarre that this strike took place within an hour of my arrival and within an hour of me communicating to somebody, perhaps erroneously, perhaps stupidly, and telling somebody my location on WhatsApp, an application that is controlled by Facebook, a corporation that is totally loyal to the United States government. My location was shelled, and it was horrific. And I am very grateful to be alive. As I noted in a post that went pretty viral on Twitter, it's now gotten about 250,000 views. I noted that if I had come back about 30 seconds earlier, I would have most likely been killed by the Kiev regime. So that was my immediate experience upon coming to Donetsk. And the other journalists, the workers at this hotel, we formed kind of a bond of camaraderie after this, and we kind of all hung out at the hotel lobby. We drank a little bit of whiskey and kind of tried to process this extremely traumatic event. And they told me, welcome to Donetsk. This is your baptism, and you are now kind of a part of this, and you understand what we've all been going through for 8 years.
8 years, yeah. And what you just mentioned too was also you were put on the kill list. Ukraine military kill list about a week or two ago. So that was recent as well, wasn't it?
Very recent. This kill list, it's maintained by the Ukrainian government. It's created by a number of influential figures within the Ukrainian government, most notably Anton Gerashenko, who's an interior ministry advisor for the Kiev regime, a man who presents himself as on the side of truth and justice, a man who tries to portray his opposition as being terrorists, and a man who says that rather than being a kill list, this is an information clearinghouse, a public service that he is performing on behalf of the Ukrainian people. It's nonsense, obviously. It's a kill list. It's used by the Kiev regime to not only by their border guards to check and verify who is and isn't allowed to come into the territory currently controlled by the Kiev regime, but it's also used in court proceedings. There have been hundreds of cases in which people have been convicted based solely on allegations that have been aired on this website. They accused me of legitimizing the occupation of Crimea and of the Donbass region after having come here and spent a few days in this region, for having witnessed firsthand the referendums that took place from September 23rd to 27th. It's a kill list that numerous people have been placed on, numerous Westerners, number of sitting congressmen, I believe, are on it. Roger Waters, the Pink Floyd guitarist and obviously the greatest lyricist of that band by far, have been placed on this list for voicing opposition, or even Oliver Stone for voicing opposition, or even skepticism towards the Kiev regime, towards their end game, or even just things as simple as encouraging them to negotiate peace, which is ostensibly what everyone in the West is supposed to want from this conflict. Right. Things as simple as asking the regime to honor their agreements in Minsk 1, Minsk 2. We can get into this later. These are sufficient to get people on this list. There are hundreds of children on this list. 13-year-old Faina, I'm going to slaughter her last name, Gastanova, 13-year-old child from Lugansk, who was placed on this government-sponsored kill list for the supposed crime of asking the UN to intervene and to put an end to bloodshed that has been going on since 2014. It's a horrifying sight. If viewers want to take a look at it, I don't really recommend it because it's like a shocks gore.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah.
As soon as you hop on, I'm sorry, my headphones just died. I hope you guys can still hear me.
Yeah, your volume's gone a little down. So if you want to do something to get your microphone up, I can see you fine, but it's just your audio's gone down. But we had been talking to Vanessa about the military kill list while you adjust that, the volume, and she's also on it as well. And the UK government, we were discussing how the UK government has done nothing, but in fact, it seems like they're supporting it. Has the US, anyone from the US government given you any, especially after you almost being killed, any kind of support or anything, security, any kind of recognition or something that your life is in danger while you're trying to do your reporting, or nothing?
No, they have not received any support from the U.S. Embassy, from the State Department. On the contrary, I have read a statement from National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who says that anyone who has given support to what they frame as fake referendums in these 4 regions, which recently voted to realign with Russia, will be subject to punishment, will be subjected to whatever. They haven't specified exactly what the penalties will be, but they said any individual, any entity, whether that be individual or state-based, will be subjected to punishment if we have helped support these referendums. It's very vague. It's very intimidating. It's very mafioso.
Let's go back. So referendum is, you're an impartial observer of an election process. So they're proposing to punish, but not saying what the punishment is and considering it support if you're an impartial observer?
Right. So neither the term support nor the punishment has been defined. It's a very mafioso style threat.
Right.
I don't know exactly what it means, but they are threatening not only myself, but a number of observers from across the world, from I believe around 40 countries, over 100 observers, including members of the African National Congress of South Africa, extremely distinguished diplomats have been placed on this list, lawyers, human rights activists, all number of people are apparently now going to be subjected to some as yet undetermined punishment. Mr. Sullivan has yet to explain exactly what that means. But I mean, to me, this is pretty typical of the response that we've received for the crime of journalism, for the crime of coming to this area and actually speaking with the people who, by the way, everyone, and I mean everyone that I spoke to, who said, like, yes, I will give an interview, expressed not just support for this position of like, let's realign with Russia, as we have been for most of our lives. We were aligned with Russia. We consider ourselves Russian. They expressed some level of, many of them expressed some level of discomfort with how long it had taken to get to this stage. They have been wanting to be a part of Russia for many years. And so I interviewed a number of people. I interviewed a woman and her 81-year-old mother. She said that she had spent 2 weeks trying to track down her mother, and her mother had spent 2 months in a basement in the Donbass. And she said only friends from Moscow helped us, not friends from Kiev.
Right.
I spoke to another elderly man in his 70s who just, and by the way, that interview I just described to you, it only lasted 45 seconds because they both broke down in tears and had to discontinue the interview. And another interview that I had with a 70-year-old man from the Donbass, he told me that his son is currently fighting against the Kiev regime. And he said that I wish that these so-called journalists from the West would have to spend just one day in our shoes, because if they did, they would understand what is happening to us. And I kind of personally feel the same way now, having been subjected personally to an artillery attack by the Kiev regime. It's hard for me not to empathize with these people, understanding, having been placed on a government kill list for the crime of journalism. It's hard for me not to empathize more and more with these people. So if the goal is to try to stop us from having sympathy for our fellow human beings who have been subjected to this level of violence for so long, for nearly a decade now, I think it's backfiring. I certainly hope so, because at this point, it's really hard for me not to feel a level of camaraderie and kinship with the people here, having myself been subjected to what they've been going through for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is some pushback from some Germans who are like, no, we're not going to engage in this bigotry and Russophobia, right? So there's some,
of course,
Germans. Okay.
Well, we have about 6 million Russian Germans in Germany, so a huge huge part of Germans knows what is going on. They are reading Russian news and so on. They have relatives in Russia. They know the truth, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this must be incredibly stressful, because you were planning to go to the country for the time it took you to do the story, I assume. So now you're looking at this limbo state. So what are your next steps and for yourself? Are you just going to continue to report from Donbass and, stay the course and try to fight legally, or what are your next steps?
Yes, I'm not going back to Germany. And stay here in Donbass. Sometimes I'm on Russia and keep on working.
Keep on working. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, like in the West, as you know, we don't get a lot of reporting, which is why I follow you and Patrick Lancaster and, Ava Bartlett. And they both have faced threats, death threats. Ava Bartlett, as you know, is on a kill list with the Ukrainian military. Are you still with any of that, or are you relatively safe? How are you doing with that?
Already last year in November, Ukrainian authorities also put me on this kill list. So practically everybody who's coming here is going on this list. There's even a 13-year-old girl from Lugansk, Faina is her name. She's writing books already about her life in a war zone, actually. Very smart young girl, and she's also on this kill list now. It's unbelievable.
How horrible. And it must be stunning for you then to see the United States giving $57 billion in weapons to Ukraine to fight this proxy war against Russia, and NATO countries, included.
I can't understand this point, because I know this is war, but this war here in Donbass began not 5 months ago, but 8 years ago. And since 8 years, this was the moment that shocked me when I came here the first time. I went to it's called the gray zone between Donbass and Ukraine. And this is where, the soldiers, you can say, are shooting every day on each other for 8 years. And in this gray zone, there are civilians living. And what I didn't know, and I thought this conflict is between soldiers from both, killing each other. But in fact, what is going on here is that for 8 years, the Ukrainian soldiers are killing civilians in this gray zone. So I met lots of people without legs, without arms, with I don't know what happened to them. Every house was somehow shot or partly broken down, because the Ukrainians shot on these people or on the houses. It's so shocking.
That's horrific.
Yeah.
And go on with that. What are some of the main myths that you're trying to dispel that the Western media, the corporate media, is pushing? Could you talk about what's really happening? You mentioned for 8 years they've been terrorizing the civilian population, their own, the Ukrainian military. What don't we know in the West that you'd like to get across about what's happening right now?
Yeah, that for 8 years, Ukrainian soldiers are terrorizing civilians in the Donbass region, because for them, the people here are not humans. They even are saying this. If you would speak Russian, you find lots of videos from Ukrainians in the internet where they are saying this is not humans. We have to kill them. They even camps for children, where they are shouting those paroles like we have to kill all Muscovites is the word for it, Muscovites. So all Russians, this is not humans, and so on. So they, for 8 years, they, how to say it? I don't know the word for it, but there are even camps for children where they teach those this stuff. And there are lots of radical groups like Azov or the Right Sector and so on that are integrated in the Ukrainian army officially. And those people, for them, those are really Nazis, but not against Jews. In this case, they are against Russians. So they really want to kill all Russians, and this is why they. By the way, in 2014, when the Ukrainian government started this attack, it was a Ukrainian president sending the Ukrainian army to attack the civilians in Donbass. The president himself gave this directive, yes. And the army came here, and they didn't really want to fight. There are lots of videos still there on the internet showing where the tanks were coming, and they didn't really want to kill their own people, right? And that's why the president sent this radical groups like Azov and the Right Sector, and mainly they are killing the civilians now here in Donbass. Have been killing for the past 8 years, and they are still going on with this. And now they even have this NATO weapons they can use, and they can now not only kill civilians on the border, but here also in the city center of Donetsk. So what I have been through the last month is not funny at all. They are shooting almost every day with this NATO weapons. There's no safe place left in Donetsk, even in the city center where it has been safe in the last years. There's really no safe place left, and every day civilians are dying, and this is horrible because there's so much. There are lots of channels on Telegram, for example, where bloggers from Donetsk publish those videos where, I don't know, of short schools. They are especially shooting on hospitals, on schools, kindergartens, and the fire station a few weeks ago, or the main streets with cafes and so on. They really do it on purpose because they know the geo data, right?
So oh my God. Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
No problem. It's okay.
I was just going to ask, so how do you deal with that on a daily basis when you walk out the door to go to a cafe or to go to the grocery store? Are you dealing with safety issues every single day as a result of this?
Well, they're not shooting every minute, so you just wait until they are not shooting anymore for about an hour, and then you go. Most of the time they're shooting for an hour, and then a few hours not, and then they start again. So this is how we live here. And it happens that you're in a restaurant sitting outside on the terrace, nice weather, eating some ice cream, and then they're starting to shoot, and you're just listening to this. It started there. Now you hear this meow over your head, and you listen. How far is it coming down? Is it closer or not, or far away? And then you go.
And for our audience, because when we think of military, we're visualizing a battlefield actually, but what you're describing are civilians trying to go about their daily life and being basically on a front line. So that the soldiers are they targeting civilians as well as the soldiers, or just are civilians collateral damage in this case?
No, they kill civilians on purpose because most of the men are at the front. So in the city center, Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? You're doing fine. We can see you. Hello. We can see you and hear you. It looks like Alina's
Hello?
having. Yes, we can hear you. There you
Okay.
go.
Okay.
We're here. You were here the whole time. We could hear you, but apparently you couldn't hear us.
Oh, okay. Okay.
My question was regarding civilians being targeted.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the men are at the front right now. So in the city center, we only have women, kids, and older people. And well, about 2 weeks ago, we had the case that politically active, well, not children anymore. What is the name for it? Well, young people who were politically active. They had a big meeting. Well, young girls and young girls and boys who are actively, I don't know, supporting some ecology projects or projects to help kids or so on. No, they met up, about 20 of them, and the Ukrainians on purpose shot on this building where they met.
Oh.
So, and they killed lots of this young people. So, and this is not a single case. It's horrible what is going on here, and it's for me it's unbelievable that the West still is going on with delivering these weapons to the Ukrainian army because they are killing civilians here. I can't understand it.
Is any human rights organization at all looking into this, the civilian casualties? Is anyone stepping up? Or is the West just simply, basically lying to everyone and just funding this proxy war?
I can only say that we had here in the city the OECD, OSCE, for the last 8 years, and they left in the beginning of the special operation, and there were lots of what is it? Well, it came out that the OBCE published data, especially geodata, gave geodata to the Ukrainians about positions, where the positions of the Donetsk or Lugansk army was, and so on. Were.
So they were talking.
So they practically acted like agents. They found out where the positions are and gave this data to the Ukrainians. So they were supporting the Ukrainian side.
So they're colluding with Ukraine to go after civilians. That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And I wanted to kind of ask you about, now that you've been in Moscow, because I know our listeners, our audience wanted to hear what it's like. There's a lot of Russophobia, as you know, right now from the West, hysteria that's very negative towards Russians. And today, I told you just before we came on that it was announced that the EU has decided to break its agreement with Russia about visas. They're going to make it very difficult and expensive for Russian tourists to travel around Europe, which is just, it's ridiculous. But I wanted to see, if the same bias applies to Americans going to Moscow. Like, have you experienced any of that, or how are they treating you and that sort of thing?
Yeah, no. I mean, people have been really nice. I mean, some people get frustrated, when you don't speak the language, more so with that they don't speak it. They get frustrated. I haven't really experienced any negativity towards me. In fact, there's more of an interest of, what are you doing here? Why are you here as an American? What's wrong with you? Like, why would you be here right now? Rather than like, oh, like Yankee go home. And that is what Americans experience in a lot of parts of the global South, because of the exploitation and the imperialism that certain countries in, like, say, Nicaragua but it's mostly from the political aspect of not towards American people as much as the arrogance of the American government. And that's something that every single country that has been placed as being adversarial to the United States says. Daniel Ortega, in his inauguration, he said, we love the American people. It's the American government we have an issue with. And I think that applies to so many people and countries that are painted as adversarial. People don't hate Americans here. They don't even hate the American culture. In fact, they still have a very positive view overall, at least in Moscow, about the West, particularly the United States. They listen to American music. There's a lot of places that, whether it's restaurants or bars that have American names, they love American like karaoke. There's so much love for American movies and Hollywood. In fact, I mean, the Russians are very, very, very fond of film. And Russian film has a lot of history as well, but they really do love American films and stuff. And so I think that this idea that they hate Americans and they want death to all Americans, whether it's Russians, whether it's Iranians, whether it's Syrians or Chinese, that's just not the case. It's our government making us feel like these people hate us because they don't want us to understand that they're the problem. And these people simply know that they're the problem. They know that Americans aren't really, that Americans are propagandized, and Americans, there's this idea that Americans are dumb because there's a lot of miseducation in our country, as we've seen displayed. People don't even know where Taiwan is. So that sort of thing. And that is true. Like when I visited Europe itself, that was true. Making fun of Americans for being loud and for being self-centered. And I think that is a product of our creation, meaning it's done on purpose, through miseducation, through distraction, through entertainment. And we're distracted.
And through the propaganda of American exceptionalism, like there's this view by Americans, this arrogance when we go, and Joe Biden is the epitome of that. Like when he was discussing firing, back a few years ago, firing the Ukrainian, I think it was like one of the lead attorneys who, by the way, was investigating Hunter Biden because Hunter Biden had his, was getting paid like $50,000 a month by Burisma. And three grown adult children of some of the representatives, Nancy Pelosi, I think, Dianne Feinstein, was it Dianne Feinstein or another one, and then Joe Biden's son, all had jobs with Burisma. And it's amazing. Like on one hand, they put down other European nations, America does, or Russia, but it's exploiting it at the same time. It's bizarre and it's hypocritical. And of course, when I brought up to you about the banning of the Russian tourists, like trying to make it very difficult for Russian tourists to go to Europe. I mean, that's unheard of. That's ridiculous. I mean, what are your thoughts on banning the tourists?
Yeah. So if we replace Russians with Jews, wouldn't the world be appalled and have a problem? I mean, haven't we gone through this already? I mean, it's not even just that. They've been destroying every ounce of their culture. They've been telling people, like in Ukraine, that they can't speak Russian. And then, of course, Europe has done, and both the United States have destroyed the lives of many athletes that are Russian, ballet dancers, musicians, artists, as if it's their fault. They've also just done things like bans Russian literature in some places, burning books. Like, what is this? This is an attack on an entire culture, which is the reason Russia has stood up to the West and NATO, because it's almost like if they allowed this to happen, that would be the end of Russia. And I think that it was something that it wasn't easy for Russia to do. A lot of people were really split on this issue, because even though they might support their country, they didn't want the sanctions. They didn't want the economic backlash that happened immediately after, Putin's military intervention into Ukraine. And I still call it that because that's what it was initially. I mean, he was asked by the people in the Donbass for years. He was criticized for not going in sooner. And I think a lot of it had to do with the timing. A lot of it had to do with, okay, like there's no point. This is the point of no return now. We can't not go in there. Because now, of course, China is playing a bigger role. 8 years ago, a lot of people, I don't think we knew what we know now. I think there's more of an awareness, and there's more of an opposition to the West as well. So I think that also the timing had to be correct. But unfortunately, in these 8 years, 14,000 people in the Donbass have been killed, and some have been living under just awful conditions. And if you watch any of the documentaries on RT that are there, countless of them, or if you watch Ukraine on Fire, if you watch any of the media that has been totally censored in the West, you will see that. You will at least see this other perspective. There's a reason they're not letting you see that. If they had nothing to lose.
Yeah, it's
wouldn't.
really stunning about trying to erase 1,000 years of history and culture and scientific advancement, and the first people in space and all the cultural achievements and artistic achievements of Russia. It's ridiculous trying to rewrite that history, like Steven Bandera trying to whitewash him and make him like he was a good guy when he was a Nazi collaborator and was responsible for killing, I don't know, 33,000 plus Jewish and other people during that time. So it's bizarre. Like Vogue, I had a conversation with someone that Vogue magazine was trying to rehabilitate Steven Bandera's image, and it was stunning to see that in corporate press. But yet I guess we shouldn't be surprised at the amount of
no, it's as American as apple pie. We've completely helped Nazis. I mean, since World War II, and like, I mean, we continuously did it. We continuously covered for them, and they have infiltrated our own government. I mean, that is a fact. That is, what was it? Is it Operation? I forget. I don't know why I'm blanking out, but it was a particular operation. I think it was Operation Paperclip. But it was basically, when I talk about fascism, when I say fascism, I mean the people in suits, the people with power that manipulate and move the pieces to manipulate the rest of the world. And it's not like you don't have control as a person, is that they do everything they can to take away your people's power. And they also psychologically make people feel like they can't fight against this evil. And I think there's like, you have to be very careful to, when we talk about the establishment, when we talk about the elite, the predator class, I like to call them, because there's nothing elite about them. They think they are above everybody else, but when we talk about them, in this cabal of people and these people, the globalists, we have to be careful to understand that these people come together because they have vested interests, and they're a 1% or a fraction of a 1%. They're very powerful people, but that doesn't mean that you don't have control, and that doesn't mean that there's no opposition to that. And I think there is opposition, not just in nation states, but within nation states, within different groups within nation states. There's oppositions here. You can't say all of Russia is one thing, all of China is one thing, all of the United States is one thing, because as we know, in the United States, we have completely different points of views all over the United States. So you can't just say everybody else is going to think the same, and then they don't. And that's what you find out when you live in Russia, is you find people that are supportive of Putin, you find people that aren't crazy about him, but you do find a lot of people that do understand that the West has done a lot of damage, and they know their history way more than we know our history, which is why we're so propagandized.
Right, because of the lack of education and all of that's happening right now.
What's up, bro?
What's going on, y'all?
Hey, look who joined us.
Yeah, I'm on East Coast time, so forgive me. I'm like, am I supposed to go on at 10 or 9?
No, it's cool. It's cool. I'm glad. So Ryan, I don't know if you've met Rome. Rome, this is Ryan, but
hey, yes, of course. He's been on my show a few times. I love me some Rome.
There you have it.
Rome is the man.
I'll be trying to be nice, so I won't get y'all kicked,
Oh, I get just kicked just for being here. So
oh yeah.
So,
Man, life really got to set the
no things there. But so, you know, and I want to encourage the audience right now to like, subscribe to this, you know, to this live stream, please. And also if you have any questions for Rome or for Ryan or comments you want us to read, send them in and we'll make this interactive a bit. So Ryan was just breaking it down for us about the state of the world, and you've been out helping today again. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Every day.
Yeah. So can you give us an update on the tour of the poor and where you're at and what's going on?
Right now I'm in Detroit, Michigan. I'm focusing on giving away 10,000 plus diapers, wipes. We're doing a barbecue. Just to get together, I'm gonna have some a media presence there. We're gonna be starting to shoot my documentary with Right Brian TV. They want to get a hold of everything I'm doing on the ground as far as tour for the poor, RBN, even stuff on the ground that you guys don't get to see. You know, like me fundraising and how I actually come across people to have these conversations, whether they be conservative or socialist or whatnot. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. I'm trying to pack my bags, get ready for Delaware, Kansas City, and then I might be doing something in New York again with Josana. So it's been a hell of a road, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, good. Yeah, you're doing a lot of good. You're down there doing action. And, you know, Ryan, that's one of the things I wanted to get back to you about what you were talking about earlier. What are some actions that people can take, like right now? Because we're coming up on the midterms. People are foolishly donating to both Republicans and Democrats, but to Democrats right now, which is, you know, they should be helping other people. And what are some action things that we can do? Right?
First off, do not give any money to Democrat politicians, Republican politicians. These parties are not on our side. Your money is better spent giving it to people like Rome, who are out there in the streets doing mutual aid and direct action. You know, that's how you can get involved. There's also other parties who actually care about their communities. We've got the Socialist Alternative Party in Seattle. It's more focused in Seattle right now, but I know there's other chapters. They do great work. Shama Savant does great work. You know, there's a lot of labor movements going on. I think one of the most important things you can do right now is organize your workplace, take some power back from the CEO of your company who is literally exploiting you. It's important for workers to understand their power, to understand that, you know, these CEOs think they run the American economy. No. None of the goods get to market. None of the products get made. Nothing in this country happens without the working class. It's the working class who runs the economy, and the workers deserve pretty much. I mean, what I feel is the workers deserve all of the profits. I mean, that, you know, when you look at different models and stuff, that's really what convinced me.
We deserve 90%.
They deserve it. I mean, they're literally that, and that is what socialism is. I think there's so much fear mongering around it, but essentially that the workers own the means of production, that they produce the goods, they make the goods. Someone like Jeff Bezos, you cannot become a billionaire without exploiting all of the workers underneath you. Jeff Bezos couldn't go out there and deliver 1 million goods to market every day. His workers do that, you know, and you find out these workers are peeing in bottles and they're not getting bathroom breaks and they're getting underpaid. They're not even getting paid a living wage. And so, you know, enough is enough. For me, the working class comes first. And these two parties exploit the working class, and they also pander to the working class. Every time elections roll around, the Democrats, Republicans, they have the same message. It's just, again, it's a little different. They use different rhetoric, but they both pretend like they care about the working class. And the truth is, both of these parties don't give a shit about the working class. They actively work against the working class, and they literally exist to write laws to benefit the CEO class and the billionaire class. So do not give your money to these politicians. Get out in your communities, organize your workplaces, and find find opportunities where you can also just have conversations, right? Yeah. I think right now we're in a space where I don't know what the next big movement looks like. But what I do know is that I'm not wasting time on another Bernie Sanders movement where you just bring together millions of people who do want to see change. Let's get it straight here. There's nothing wrong with Bernie's voters. Bernie's voters were voting for change. The problem is Bernie was a sheep herder, and he led them into a Democratic Party that had no interest in enacting any of Bernie's policies. The Democratic Party has no interest in a living wage. They have no interest in health care for everyone. Again, the Democrats exist to stop any real workers' movement and to co-opt grassroots movements. So I just know whatever happens next, we cannot get involved in a political movement that is going to be funneled into one of these two corrupt parties, because nothing will happen. We've got to build movements outside of the duopoly, and then you can pressure these corrupt politicians. And I would also encourage people to speak out. Again, educate people in your families, your friends, and speak out against these two parties. They don't deserve our votes. They don't deserve our money, our time, our resources. They are corrupt to the core. They deserve to be, like, literally both parties deserve to be destroyed. Goodbye. Like, neither
There you
supports
have it.
justice,
There
neither
you have it,
supports
Ryan.
liberty. Get rid of these parties.
We're fucked. I enjoy it. I like it better than anything